Last year we saw that China had the lowest number of births it's actually had probably in the last 60 years. And we're now talking about a total fertility rate of 1.3, which means that on average each woman has 1.3 children. But the demographic changes that China is seeing are not unique to China. So what we see across the world is as that economies become more developed, that you will see a reduction in fertility. And the reasons for that are many. So one of them is that in less developed economies you will see a greater reliance on children for subsistence agriculture. So families think about having more children almost as an insurance policy. But as quality of healthcare improves, as wealth of individual households improves, as education levels improve, then the need to have these very big families is no longer there. At the same time, over the last 50, 60 years, we've seen a huge increase in terms of levels of education for women, women coming into the labour force as well. And so this also has had an impact on the number of children that couples choose to have. But maybe if we take it down to a personal level, because deciding how many children you have is a personal issue, I always say that I think couples ask themselves 4 questions. So the first question is, can we afford it? And so that very much depends on, how much does it cost to have a living space that's big enough to have, more than one child? How much is education? How much is after school activities? Those investments we want to see. The second question a couple will ask is, how do we balance work and having a child or family life? So, if I need to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and my spouse needs to work 6 days a week for 12 hours, how are we going to manage having a bigger family? And so that obviously impacts the decision. And I always say that the third question then is maybe a question more that a woman asks herself, which is, if we're going to have all these children, who's actually going to spend their time doing the childcare and actually managing the domestic sphere? So if that's the woman on her own, then her willingness to have more children would be very different to if we actually see a couple where there's an equal responsibility for childcare and an equal responsibility for the domestic sphere. And that's actually coming out now in research that's very clearly showing that when men take on a greater responsibility of household chores and childcare, you will see a couple be more willing to consider having an additional child. And then the fourth one, which I think we think about less in terms of economics and demography, is, do we really want to have more children? And what I mean by that is that the model of parenting and what it means to be a good parent, I think has changed substantially over the last 50 years. And so now parents think much more about the quality of the relationship they have with their child and how do they parent well to really put maximum investment into their child and to ensure their child has the best future possible. And so with that type of quite intensive model of parenting, it obviously becomes much more difficult to maintain that and be that modern concept of a good parent if you have more children. And so that can also, feature in decision making, I think, around how many children you might have. Just UNFPA generally would say that these demographic transitions have happened across history. So they're not necessarily bad things. It's about looking at how your demographic change is happening and then thinking about how, as a government, thinking about the best investments you can make to really harness the population that's there. For China, now China is moving into a demographic transition of an aging population, which we're seeing, as I say, in many countries across the world. And now we're talking about the potential of a second dividend. So when you see this aging population and this large cohort of older people in a population, whereas traditionally we used to think you're born, you're a child, you work, you retire, you stop working. Now, I think there's a whole new way of thinking about old age, because people are coming to the age of 60, 65. They're healthier, they're wealthier, they're better educated, life expectation has gone up. I mean, we're now talking about living to 100 being a normality in the next 20 to 30 years. So nobody's going to stop work at 65 and sit around for the next 35 years doing nothing. So thinking through the second demographic dividend is what policies and investments and changes in the workplace do we need to make to really enable those older people to play this productive role in society.